Hello, Chris. I'm back again, this time with feedback on what you've called your Coda. So I guess I will start there by saying I feel like this should be, sorry, here you go, the Coda. I feel like this should be, definitely be included in the short story. As it is, your short story was quite short, and so if you're worried about word count or anything like that, I think that adding the Coda to the story proper will not damage it in any way. In fact, it answers that overarching question that I had after I finished reading your short story is, why Mila? Why this moment in his life? Like, why are we hearing this story right now? And you answered that question beautifully. And in fact, I'm really surprised by not just how much you wrote when prompted, but how much more expansive the story was that you were able to put onto the page. Now, I don't know if that's like you had a flash of inspiration and that's what came out, or if this is something you've been thinking of for a while and you thought, oh, okay, that would be a good spot to put it. But well done. I really enjoyed reading it, and the sick and twisted side of me enjoyed seeing the Warlock get some comeuppance for the things that he has done, and you introduced a new character. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. Tella. I'm probably butchering her name. Tala. I think it's Tala, unless it's Tala. I like it either way. So, what I've done, of course, is I've gone through, and I hope you don't mind, I took the liberty of double spacing the Coda just so that I had more white space to write my notes on for you. Because I felt like last time I was like writing these cramped little things, you probably had to have a magnifying glass to even see what it was. Though, I suppose since it was on the computer, you could zoom in. So, yeah, overall, I really enjoyed reading it. Like I said, I think this should be part of the short story proper. It gives us, it takes away the lopsided feeling that the short story had. Remember how I mentioned so much build-up, so much backstory, and then like half of it was backstory and then half of it was the story proper, whereas when you're getting that much backstory as a reader, it's just a pattern that our minds usually expect for there to be more to the story. Because otherwise we're like, well, why do I have to know all of this backstory if all I was getting was, this one little bit? So expanding upon it like you've done, I think really helps balance it out. And again, like I said, it answered my overarching question and left me wanting more, which is always a wonderful, wonderful sign. I had another random thought after I finished this. If this feels right to you, go for it. If not, just be like, okay, that's cool, but that's not what I want to do. I was thinking of how visually stunning your story is with the visuals. I don't know how else to phrase that. Because, you have blue roses, you have this palace with animated marble statues, you have the Warlock with 2 different colored eyes, and the story itself is very dramatic, sometimes bordering on melodramatic, but I know that that's part of the horror genre, and my thought was this would make a great graphic novel. I don't know if you have any artistic skills or if you have any friends or anyone you could reach out to who is well versed in producing graphic novels or at least doing the artwork. If you don't, you could go to a website like DeviantArt and have a look around, see if there's an artist whose style you like, make a short list of them, reach out to them, see if maybe they're interested in going in on this with you. If you wanted to do that, you could do like what I did for my audiobook. You could do a crowdfund to fund it, or maybe you guys could come up with like a 50-50 split of the end product. Whatever it is you want to do, maybe you don't want to do it at all, and that's perfectly fine too. But I just thought that this story lent itself very well to the visual medium, and I was picturing it in my mind and of course wanting to see it as well. And I think because it is so heavily visual, those visuals do help carry the story in a lot of ways. So that said, I think that I remember last time I was talking about the characters feeling a little bit maybe two-dimensional, and this time we learned more about the Warlock. We got to see we got to see the fact that he has a side that can love. All we've known is that he's cruel and that he has these wives and they're just tools to him. And he doesn't even sleep with them. I had thought that that was part of why he wanted a wife all this time. He's like, I'll just get something out of her and steal her soul. But, so I found that very fascinating, a very good twist to find out that he not only is capable of love, but that after Tala destroys him, leaves him for dead, he's still like, but I still love her. I find that conflict of emotions, that hatred and fear he has for her, and yet that love, very fascinating. So I wrote a little note on the page being like, can we hear a little bit more about this? Because, and maybe that was intentional, maybe that was one of the questions that you wanted to leave unanswered, but I felt like, yeah, I wanted to know, maybe not flesh out their backstory yet, but I wanted to know, what is it about her that keeps him coming back? Or when she shows up, he's like, okay, you can come back into my life, even though you totally screwed me over last time. Let's see. Yeah, most of my notes are, again, I just went through and edited the first book of my Afterworld series, and I had to do the same thing. I went through and I'm like, oh, you used that word twice in 2 sentences, like my little pet peeve thing that I explained to you last time. So I went through and I did that. I did my best with grammar. I'm not an absolutely ace grammar Nazi, but through my understanding, I marked where, what was an introductory clause, what was an aside, all that sort of thing. And my suggestions of where paragraph breaks should be, I put those in there as well. The other moment where I felt like you could expand a little was when he makes the decision to bury the palace. That feels like such a massive decision for his character, If he has spent hundreds of years building this little kingdom for himself, he's destroyed dozens at least of lives through these women, and not only the soldiers, the undead soldiers at his command, but for him to just be like, hey, I don't want to be looking over my shoulder for Tala, I've got to move. You know what, I'll just bury my palace. I wanted more of his thought process there, because I thought, geez, that's such a dramatic decision to make, and there's so many consequences, and it did leave me with questions. I'm like, well, what about his collection of souls? Is that being buried with the palace? Is that something he can tap into from afar? Since a soul doesn't even have a physical shape, is that something metaphysical that maybe is just with him at all times, and the collection part was just kind of a metaphor? Obviously it left me with a lot of questions, which is good, because that means that your world is authentic enough and real enough for me to have those questions and to be curious about it. So I felt like that was a moment that could have been more of a moment. I know you wrote this in a rush. Please don't take this as, oh, you did this wrong, or anything like that, because, like I said, I'm very impressed by how much more story you had in you for the Warlock. And you mentioned a short story collection. I'm not sure if those are all short stories about the Warlock, or if they're just similar stories, but I can tell how much interest you have in the Warlock, and how he's kind of a vehicle for you to tell these stories that are just yearning to come out, because how else could you have written that so quickly? And to me, you told me you took a really long time writing the first half of the story, and then this part just kind of splurged out of you. I can't notice a massive difference in the style or in the content. I thought that they were really consistent, which is awesome. For me, I feel like that's something that sometimes I struggle with. If I wrote something over a period of time and then months later come back, I'm like, oh gosh, does it stylistically even seem the same? Does it feel off? Does it feel different? Has my writing changed styles? No, this all felt consistent. And the fact that it didn't take you months, or that you haven't gone over it a dozen times, that doesn't show either. So, well done again. That's all good. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't want to just sit here and read my notes, because that would be redundant. You're going to be reading them anyway. I don't know, maybe you want me to be left with these questions, but I do want to know, where is the humanity in the Warlock? And why is Tala protecting or getting her revenge, and how she says, remember, I love you so much. You know, I'm paraphrasing here, that's not her exact line. But when she says that, I got the impression that she's trying to teach him a lesson, because she's like, this is tough love, kind of, this is for your own good. If you don't shape up, you're gonna meet an untimely end. Well, okay, untimely, what, like a couple thousand years later? I don't know. But I felt like she's thinking, you know, you've lost your way, and I'm doing this because I love you, even though it's cruel and sick and twisted. Or they just have some kind of weird masochistic relationship, and they just find each other every few hundred years and then nearly kill each other, and I don't know. So all of those are questions I have, and again, congratulations on building such a rich world for the Warlock to inhabit in such a small amount of space in the short story. I'm definitely impressed by that. And I think that's another reason why I think this lends itself to a visual storytelling medium as well as a short story, because you know, you want to see the world, you want to go into it even further than you do in this short story. And also, I think some of the dialogue is sparse, the descriptions of the characters and their emotions are a little sparse, and that's probably just your style, but because it is curt in that way, that's also why I thought it reminded me kind of a graphic novel, because there isn't room to expand in that medium as much as there is in, well, you know, a novel like this thick. But of course, this is a short story, so maybe that's an unfair comparison to make, but again, that was, your characters seem to lend themselves to a medium like that, and it's also a genre story, you know? It's interesting to me because, kind of similarly to Darkling, it's a horror/fantasy genre, which, I don't know if that, I guess that's dark fantasy. I guess that counts as dark fantasy, and I would say that the greats like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Bram Stoker's Dracula essentially started that genre, and yours is continuing in that vein, and I don't know, it's fun to read, it's entertaining, like you knew I would. I enjoyed the Warlock getting some revenge, or having some revenge meted out upon him, is how I should have phrased that. So that was satisfying as a reader. So emotionally, you introduced me to this character, I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is such an a-hole, he's using these women, and then he meets, isn't it ironic that he meets the one woman who he truly loves, and she almost kills him. So, again, it's given me a lot of food for thought, and I appreciate seeing his character go through this journey. Now I know it's the story of how he became who we will meet next. It's almost like I know there's a backstory in it, but it's like that's like the backstory of the backstory, because now I see that this is, you know, the way that you answer the question of who's your main character, who's your protagonist, the easiest way to answer that is who goes through the most change. So in this version now, with the Coda, I would say the Warlock goes through the most change, because Mila was just kind of surrendered to her fate to begin with, and then she's just like, oh, whatever. And yeah, it is surprising that she would have the strength to kill herself, but then that's explained as Tala gave her that extra strength that she needed to do that. So, and that kind of was, God, in a sick way, that's almost like Tala being like, I'm coming, I just sent you a little message, I'm coming, oh, you didn't get it? Okay, I'm just gonna appear here now. So, again, I thought all that was cool. And if you want to, this stuff can definitely be fleshed out more. Again, I'm not sure if you're going for a more minimalist style, but there's definitely room to flesh out all of this and to add, you know, a few more subtleties of character, a few more subtleties in their dialogue, because as it is, everything's very direct, and that works within this context, I think, but that's also why it makes me think of graphic novel, because in a graphic novel, everything is kind of clear-cut and direct in a lot of ways, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and I will be sending this to you today. Today is, gosh, what is it? March, oh my gosh, 5th? Is today March 5th? Today's Tuesday. March 6th, sorry, of 2018. And yeah, it's been a pleasure working with you, and thank you for letting me read your work and introducing me to the Warlock. I know he's a character very dear to your heart, and that shows in the writing. So, well done. Alright, thank you, Chris.